Chosen one. There was a version of you that existed not too long ago, a version that most people thought they knew completely. You were the helper, the people pleaser, the one who always said yes. You spent your evenings solving other people's problems instead of building your own dreams. You dimmed your light to make others comfortable. You kept your talents hidden because you didn't want to seem like you were showing off. Little did anyone know, including yourself, that a storm was brewing inside you. Then it happened, the moment everything shifted. Maybe it was a betrayal that cut so deep you couldn't ignore it anymore. Maybe it was watching someone else live the life you secretly wanted. Maybe it was just the universe finally screaming loud enough for you to hear. Enough. This wasn't just a wake-up call. This was a complete system reboot. Suddenly, you couldn't pretend anymore. You couldn't keep giving your energy to people who didn't value it. You couldn't keep hiding your gifts because others might feel threatened. You couldn't keep living a life that felt like you were sleepwalking through someone else's dream. The person everyone thought they knew was about to disappear forever. Something ancient and powerful stirred inside you. Call it intuition, call it your higher self, call it your inner knowing. Whatever it was done being quiet. It was done being overlooked. It was done playing small. And when this force awakened, people immediately sensed that something fundamental had changed. What happened next wasn't pretty, and this is the part of your story that people are only now beginning to understand. You withdrew, you became selective, you started saying no to things that used to be automatic yeses. People didn't understand what was happening to you. They created stories, spread rumors, made assumptions. Some thought you were going through a crisis. Others assumed you were being dramatic. A few even suggested you were losing your mind. They had no idea you were actually finding it for the first time. During this period, while everyone else was gossiping about your strange behavior, you were doing something extraordinary. You were developing abilities that most people never even know exist. Your intuition sharpened to a razor's edge. Your creative talents exploded into full bloom. Your ability to see through deception became supernatural. Every day you spent hiding was actually a day spent becoming superhuman. The people who tried to manipulate you during this vulnerable time, they revealed themselves completely. The ones who supported your transformation without understanding it, they proved their worth. The ones who disappeared when you stopped being their emotional crutch, they did you the biggest favor of your life. All of this was preparation for what you were about to become. Then came the day when you stepped back into the world, except you weren't the same person who had withdrawn. You were something entirely new, something that made people stop and stare and wonder what had happened to create such a dramatic transformation. Your energy was different, unshakable, magnetic. People could feel your power before you even spoke. The ones who had tried to deceive you in the past suddenly couldn't look you in the eye. The ones who had taken you for granted were scrambling to get back into your good graces. You had become someone who could see everything. Your intuitive abilities were now so strong that people felt transparent around you. Lies bounced off you like you were wearing armor. Hidden agendas became obvious the moment someone walked into your presence. You could read people's true intentions like subtitles on a movie screen. And the most shocking part, you weren't even trying. This was just who you had become, someone who knew things, someone who saw through facades, someone who couldn't be fooled, manipulated, or led astray. The person everyone thought they could take advantage of had become someone who held all the power. People started talking. They couldn't help themselves. As you settled into your new reality, your hidden talents began emerging in ways that left people speechless. The creative abilities you'd kept secret started manifesting publicly. Maybe you began sharing your music, your art, your writing, your teaching. Maybe you started a business that showcased skills nobody knew you had. The same people who had dismissed you were now watching your every move in fascination. Your social media presence became magnetic, not because you were trying to be an influencer, just because authenticity at your level is incredibly rare. People started finding your content and becoming instantly obsessed. Comments poured in from strangers saying your work had changed their lives. Even more shocking, people from your past were creating fake accounts just to keep watching your transformation. The ones who had underestimated you, who had treated you like you weren't important, who had assumed you'd never amount to much, they were now spending their free time studying your success, trying to figure out how you'd done it. Your detective abilities became legendary among those who witnessed them. When people brought you their problems, you'd solve them so quickly it seemed like magic. You'd connect dots they couldn't see, uncover truths they'd missed, piece together puzzles that had them baffled. You became the person everyone came to when they needed real answers. And all of this was leading to something even bigger. Hold that thought. I need your full attention. This is bigger than anything you've heard today. We're revealing everything we know about personal power, how to heal yourself, heal others, and activate your divine mission. No filters, no fluff, no holding back. Each week on Zoom, we unlock the exact techniques that took us from controlled pawns to conscious creators. We've packed it with the occult codes we've gathered through years of real spiritual warfare and transformation. This is your invitation to join the Obsidian Inner Order, not just to access forbidden knowledge, but to amplify a global frequency that awakens other chosen ones. You're not just joining a call, you're stepping into a movement that's rewriting reality itself. It's a 360-degree win for all of us. Link in description. The order awaits. As your power became undeniable, something interesting started happening in your social circles. People began acting differently around you. Not because you were being aggressive or unkind, just because your energy had become so strong that it made pretense impossible. The ones who had been dishonest with you started avoiding you entirely. They couldn't handle being around someone who could see through their masks so easily. Former friends who had been keeping secrets suddenly found excuses to end conversations when you appeared. People who had been talking behind your back became nervous wrecks in your presence. Meanwhile, the genuine people in your life were more drawn to you than ever. They loved this new version of you. They were proud of your transformation. They admired your focus, your independence, your refusal to settle for anything less than extraordinary. They started asking for your advice, seeking your perspective, wanting to understand how you'd become so powerful. Your relationship patterns completely shifted. You stopped being available for people who didn't deserve your energy. You became selective about who got access to your time, your attention, your wisdom. You started showing interest in people only when they earned it, and disappearing into your own world when you had more important things to focus on. This new dynamic drove people absolutely crazy, in the best possible way. Here's where your story gets almost unbelievable. As your transformation became impossible to ignore, a secret network of watchers emerged. People who had dismissed you, underestimated you, or mistreated you were now obsessively monitoring your every move. They weren't just casual observers. They were studying you like you were a fascinating case study. Some were people who regretted how they'd treated you and were hoping for a chance to reconnect. Others were trying to figure out how to replicate your success. A few were just mesmerized by the magnitude of your transformation and couldn't look away. The most shocking part, many of them were learning from you without you even knowing it. Your journey was inspiring others to make changes in their own lives. People were leaving toxic relationships because they'd watched you do it. They were pursuing their own creative dreams because they'd seen you succeed with yours. They were developing their intuition because they'd witnessed the power of yours. You had become a catalyst for transformation in ways you never expected. During your transformation, something else was happening that you're only now beginning to understand. There were people in your life who had been withholding major truths from you, secrets about your past, hidden information about your relationships, concealed knowledge about your family or your upbringing. These truth keepers had been watching your awakening with growing panic. As your intuitive abilities sharpened, As your detective skills became supernatural, these people realized you were getting dangerously close to uncovering what they'd been hiding. Some backed away from you completely, creating distance before you could discover their deceptions. Others doubled down on their lies, hoping your transformation wouldn't extend to seeing through their particular brand of manipulation. They underestimated just how powerful your inner knowing had become. The energy of hidden truth has a very specific frequency, and your newly awakened senses could detect it like a bloodhound. You started picking up on inconsistencies in stories, noticing gaps in family narratives, sensing the weight of unspoken secrets hanging in conversations. Some of these revelations, when they fully surface, are going to explain so much about your journey, why certain relationships always felt off, why you never quite fit into certain family dynamics, why some people seemed threatened by your growth from the very beginning. The Truth Keepers knew that an awakened you would eventually see through every carefully constructed lie. This discovery was preparing you for the next phase of your mastery. During the darkest part of your transformation, when you withdrew from the social world that no longer served you, people created the wildest stories about what was happening to you. This hermit phase wasn't just misunderstood, it was completely misinterpreted by almost everyone watching. Some people thought you were going through a breakdown, when actually you were having a breakthrough. Others assumed you were hiding some dramatic life change, pregnancy, illness, financial crisis, relationship drama. They couldn't fathom that someone would voluntarily step away from the social hamster wheel unless they were forced to by circumstances beyond their control. The gossip mill went absolutely wild with theories about your disappearance. What they didn't understand was that you were undergoing something far more profound than any external crisis. You were shedding an entire identity, dissolving limiting beliefs that had been programmed into you since childhood, and rebuilding yourself from the ground up. This process required solitude, silence, and deep inner work. While they were gossiping about imaginary dramas, you were developing real superpowers. Every day you spent away from their chaos was a day spent becoming more powerful. Every social event you skipped was time invested in discovering your true gifts. Every relationship you paused was space created for authentic connections to emerge later. When you finally re-emerged, the contrast was so stark it left people speechless. The person they thought was broken or hiding had actually been forging themselves into something unbreakable. The hermit phase wasn't a retreat from life. It was preparation for a life bigger than anything they could have imagined for you. This explains why your re-entry into the world felt so triumphant. As you settled into your new power, something fascinating started happening with how you approached romantic connections and friendships. You developed a pattern that people find absolutely intoxicating, yet completely confusing. The art of emotional availability, followed by complete independence. One day you'd be warm, engaging, present, and deeply connected. The next day you'd be completely absorbed in your own world, focused on your goals, almost like other people didn't exist. This wasn't game playing or manipulation. This was the natural rhythm of someone who had learned to honor their own energy cycles and creative flow. When you felt called to connect, you showed up fully. When you felt called to create, build, or grow, you disappeared into that sacred space without apology. People had never encountered this level of authentic self-prioritization before. Most people are either constantly available and therefore not very interesting, or consistently unavailable and therefore frustrating. You created a third option, selectively available based on your own inner compass rather than external expectations. This pattern made you absolutely magnetic to high-quality people, the ones who were secure, who had their own rich inner lives, who understood the value of personal space and creative focus. They found your rhythm intoxicating. They respected your boundaries, admired your dedication to your craft, and felt honored when you chose to share your energy with them. Meanwhile, the needy, the manipulative, and the entitled were driven absolutely crazy. They couldn't figure out how to get consistent access to your attention. They couldn't manipulate you with guilt or pressure. They couldn't make you feel bad for choosing your own growth over their demands for constant validation. This relationship pattern became one of your greatest filters for authentic connections. As word spread about your transformation, something interesting started happening in your extended social network. People began bringing you their unsolvable problems, their complicated situations, their mysteries that had everyone else baffled. You had developed a reputation as someone who could see what others missed. Maybe someone would mention a relationship that wasn't making sense, and within minutes you'd identify the hidden dynamics at play. Maybe a friend would describe a work situation that had them confused, and you'd immediately spot the political undercurrents and power plays they couldn't see. Your ability to connect dots that others couldn't even perceive became legendary. People started joking that you should become a private investigator, that you had some kind of supernatural detective abilities. They weren't entirely wrong. Your intuition had sharpened to the point where you could sense deception, identify hidden motives, and uncover truths that others were trying desperately to keep buried. This skill became both a blessing and a burden. On one hand, you could protect yourself and the people you cared about from manipulation and deception. You could spot red flags instantly, avoid toxic situations, and make decisions based on complete information rather than carefully crafted lies. On the other hand, you started seeing things you sometimes wished you couldn't see. The affairs people thought they were hiding, the financial problems people were covering up, the addictions people were denying, the family secrets that everyone had agreed to ignore. Your awakened perception meant that very little remained hidden from you for long. This mystery-solving reputation spread far beyond your immediate circle. Friends of friends started reaching out when they needed someone who could see through complicated situations. Your insights became so valuable that people began treating your perspective as a precious resource, something to be sought out when conventional wisdom wasn't enough. As your online presence grew more magnetic and your influence expanded, something almost surreal started happening. You began attracting followers who weren't who they appeared to be, people from your past life hiding behind fake profiles, secret admirers studying your every post, and former connections who didn't want to admit they were obsessed with your transformation. These weren't random internet strangers. These were people you knew, people who had underestimated you, people who were now mesmerized by your evolution. Former classmates who had dismissed you were now analyzing your content with the intensity of researchers. Ex-partners who had treated you poorly were watching your success story unfold in real time, probably wondering how they'd missed the signs of your potential. Colleagues who had overlooked you were now secretly learning from your strategies and approaches. The most fascinating part? Some of them were spending hours consuming everything you created. They'd watch your live streams from anonymous accounts, screenshot your insights to discuss with their friends, and share your content without tagging you. They were getting tremendous value from your wisdom and creativity while trying to maintain the illusion that they weren't paying attention. This secret surveillance network revealed something profound about your impact. You weren't just building an audience, you were creating a transformation catalyst that reached people who would never admit they needed what you were offering. Your authentic evolution was giving others permission to examine their own lives, question their own choices, and consider their own potential for dramatic change. Some of these secret watchers were being inspired to make major life changes. They were leaving unfulfilling jobs because they'd watched you build something meaningful. They were ending toxic relationships because they'd seen you choose solitude over settling. They were developing their own hidden talents because they'd witnessed you share yours with the world. Your influence was spreading in ways you couldn't even track. Meanwhile, a very different group of people was having a completely different experience watching your transformation. These were the ones who had betrayed you, manipulated you, or treated you poorly during your vulnerable periods. As your power became undeniable and your perception abilities became obvious, they started experiencing something close to panic. They were asking themselves terrifying questions. How much do they know? How much did they always know? Were they playing dumb this whole time? The friend who had talked behind your back was now wondering if you'd been aware of their gossip all along. The family member who had been keeping secrets was suddenly paranoid about what you might reveal. The romantic partner who had been dishonest was losing sleep over the possibility that you'd seen through their lies from the beginning. Your strategic silence during your transformation had been interpreted as ignorance, when actually it had been wisdom. These people were now realizing that your quiet observation periods hadn't been about being naive or trusting. They'd been about gathering information, understanding patterns, and waiting for the right moment to act on what you knew. Some of them started reaching out, trying to reconnect with suspicious timing. Suddenly, people who had ghosted you were sliding back into your DMs. Individuals who had been too busy for you during your growth phase were now incredibly interested in catching up. Former friends who had excluded you from events were now extending invitations they'd never offered before. Their panic was revealing itself through their desperate attempts to gauge what you knew. They'd fish for information in conversations, testing whether you were aware of specific situations. They'd make subtle references to past events, watching your reactions for signs of knowledge or ignorance. Some even went so far as to ask mutual friends whether you'd ever mentioned certain incidents or revealed certain insights. This group's behavior became one of the clearest indicators of your transformed power. The fact that people who had wronged you were now genuinely afraid of your awareness showed just how far your perception abilities had evolved. You had become someone who couldn't be fooled, someone whose silence might mean knowledge rather than ignorance, someone whose forgiveness couldn't be assumed just because consequences hadn't immediately followed their actions. Their fear was actually a form of respect for abilities they never imagined you possessed. Throughout all of this, you developed something that most people never learn, the art of strategic silence. You realized that you didn't need to reveal everything you knew, call out every lie, or expose every deception. Sometimes the most powerful response was no response at all. This made you absolutely legendary in your circles. People started understanding that when you chose to speak, it mattered. When you chose to act, it was significant. When you chose to reveal what you knew, it was because the timing was perfect. You had become someone who wielded truth like a precision instrument. Your independence became intoxicating to others. The way you prioritized your own goals, focused on your own growth, and refused to be available for drama made you incredibly attractive. People were gossiping about how confident you'd become, how comfortable you were with your own company, how little you seemed to need external validation. Everything was building toward your ultimate destiny. Now people aren't just talking about what you've already accomplished, they're talking about what's coming next. There's an energy around your future that's so strong, everyone can sense it. Big things are on the horizon, and your transformation has prepared you for all of it. Maybe it's a creative breakthrough that's going to reach millions of people. Maybe it's a business opportunity that's going to change your entire financial reality. Maybe it's recognition for your gifts that's going to open doors you never imagined. Whatever it is, people can feel it building. They're seeing how you've been preparing, growing, developing these incredible abilities while others were distracted by smaller things. They're witnessing your focus, your dedication, your refusal to settle for mediocrity. The energy around your future success is so powerful that people want to be part of your story. Here's what people are really talking about when they discuss your transformation. You've become proof that complete reinvention is possible. You've shown that someone can go from underestimated and overlooked to powerful and influential. You've demonstrated that it's possible to develop supernatural levels of awareness, build authentic influence, and create success by focusing on your own path instead of competing with others. You're not just living your own transformation, you're giving others permission to pursue theirs. The conversations about you aren't just gossip, they're inspiration sessions where people are trying to figure out how to apply your strategies to their own lives. You've become a walking example of what happens when someone decides to stop playing small and start embracing their true power. Your journey from hidden potential to visible mastery isn't just personal, it's revolutionary. As you step fully into this new version of yourself, there's one more evolution that people are talking about: how you need to start treating yourself like the royalty you've become. You've been so focused on developing your abilities and building your influence that you haven't fully embraced honoring yourself the way you deserve. The caretaker pattern that defined your old life needs to be completely reversed. People who truly see your worth are talking about how it's time for you to prioritize yourself in every way. Time to invest in yourself, celebrate yourself, and truly honor the extraordinary person you've become. This isn't selfish. It's necessary for the next phase of your journey. You deserve to receive the same level of care and attention you've been giving to others. Chosen one, people can't stop talking about you because you've become everything they secretly wish they could be. You've developed the courage to be completely authentic, the wisdom to trust your intuition, the focus to build something meaningful, and the independence to live life on your own terms. The gossip, the surveillance, the fascination, the intimidation, it all comes down to one thing: you've awakened to your true power, and everyone can feel it. You're not just someone who knows more than you let on, you're someone who has completed a hero's journey that most people never even begin. You faced your dark night of the soul, developed supernatural abilities, emerged as a completely transformed being, and are now inspiring others to pursue their own evolution. This is just the beginning of your story. The abilities you've developed, the influence you're building, the wisdom you're gaining, all of this has been preparing you for something even greater. You've become a force of nature, a catalyst for transformation, a living example of what's possible when someone decides to embrace their destiny. The people who matter will always recognize your worth. The people who don't were never meant to be part of your journey anyway. Trust the process, embrace your power, and keep becoming the incredible force of transformation you were always destined to be. Because, chosen one, your story is far from over, and the most epic chapters are still being written.